Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. What's up, everybody? I hope you're having an amazing week. This week on the podcast, we have Mace Curran. A few months ago, my wife sent me a random Instagram page, and I was blown away. Mace posts videos of her time in the Thunderbirds doing some crazy stuff that you have to check out. But before that, she served in the Air Force for 13 years, including missions in the Middle East. She was the second woman to serve in the Thunderbirds, and now she is an entrepreneur, a public speaker, a wife, a very inspirational person. In this podcast, we go through facing fears all the way through breaking the sound barrier. It's an incredible conversation. It's one of the favorite ones I've had so far. I hope you enjoy it. Subscribe to everything, pass it on to friends. Thank you so much for all your support. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Peaks Equipment, the world's leading technical, hard goods, and accessories brand for backcountry enthusiasts. From trekking poles to headlamps to best-in-class gaiters, Peaks delivers a system of products that work to achieve optimal performance in the harshest conditions. Don't suffer on your hunting adventures. Peaks enables you to thrive on the mountain when everyone else is going home. Visit peaksequipment.com and use code ALTITUDE for 10% off today. That's Altitude for 10% off on peaksequipment.com. Outdoor Class is the new source of premium outdoor education from trusted and knowledgeable experts. For hunters committed to improving their skills, Outdoor Class is the only subscription-based e-learning platform that provides unlimited access to video lessons from the world's most respected experts. Learn from industry leaders like Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and other experts across all the topics that affect you as a hunter. Make sure to follow Outdoor Class Official on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and take your game to the next level by going to outdoorclass.com. You can use code ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off. That is Altitude at checkout for 20% off at outdoorclass.com. What's up, Mace?
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you. We've been trying to schedule this for a while, but we both apparently have busy schedules.
Yeah, I think we had some solid excuses to move it around.
Yeah, well, it's always challenging. Life's really busy. I found that when I first started doing this, I tried to schedule 2 or 3 a week, and then I realized really quickly that, and then I would even stack 2 a day. And I realized really quickly that's no bueno, because ultimately something's going to shift in your life and you're going to have to reschedule. So now I'm just focused on doing 1 a week. And so this worked out perfectly. I had plenty of time to prepare. And man, you've had an amazing life.
It's been a journey, and especially lately, a big jump from the military.
Right.
But yeah, I feel lucky. I've got to do a lot of cool things.
I wanted to talk about for people that don't know much about you. I mean, obviously there was the intro that I just read, but can you just give a high level for those? Because I feel like my tribe of people, obviously heavy outdoors, heavy hunting, they need to know more about you. So do you mind just giving the elevator pitch on your life thus far?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a small town in north central Wisconsin, about 4,000 people. I actually, based on your audience, I did grow up hunting with my dad. I was the youngest of 3, and the other 2 had kind of already left the house. So I was out there with him from about 8 years old on, I would say, every single season. So we can talk more about that later. I didn't have any military experience or exposure in my family, and I just needed a way to pay for college. And Air Force ROTC eventually filtered to the top. And I went there as a criminal justice major with plans to eventually go to the FBI or the CIA, and saw a couple jets fly partway through that program. And that was a big pivot for me. I was like, forget that. I'm going to go fly those. And I was super focused and set that as a goal and chipped away at it for about the next 5 years, and then found myself flying F-16s in a combat squadron. And I was on active duty for just shy of 13 years. I just left about 4 months ago. So really recently, the last 3 years of that time, I was one of the pilots for the Thunderbirds. So first
Now,
year opposing solo. Sorry, go ahead.
the Thunderbirds, and we'll dig into this a lot more, but I'm just curious. So there's the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, similar things. I've never been to either show. Explain the difference.
Yeah, so they're very similar. It's almost like two friendly rivals, like two different football teams.
All right.
So we're the Air Force version. The Blue Angels are the Navy version. They fly F-18s. We fly F-16s. We work together quite a bit. We did a lot of stuff during the pandemic together. So we actually have a good relationship. We all know each other. So people are constantly comparing the two and being like, oh, they're way better. Oh, these guys suck or what, and thinking that we hate each other, but actually we're all friends and we have the same mission.
You're competitive though, I bet, right?
We are, but we enjoy hanging out with them when we cross paths.
Yeah. So did you grow up in a small town?
Yeah, only 4,000 people. So not ridiculously small, but I mean, we got a Walmart when I was in college and that was big news. So fairly small.
What part of Wisconsin?
North Central. If everyone's familiar with southern Wisconsin, Milwaukee and Madison, it's about a 3+ hour drive north of there.
I love Madison. I thought Madison was a really cool town. I visited there one time.
It is cool. Hopefully,
I actually think Wisconsin's underrated. It seems like, obviously there's the cliches of Wisconsin, cheese and farms and all these things, but it's actually a very beautiful state, right?
It is. The summers there are incredible. The winters obviously can be a bit much. I don't think I'll move back because I'm not a fan of negative 30 degrees I would say it's cold for no reason because there's no mountains there. So I'm like, why do I want it to be this cold and this snowy when it's just flat? But it is gorgeous in the summer.
Yeah. Now, do you guys have fireflies there?
We do. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. That's like, it sounds stupid, but I was on a road trip and it actually might have been in Wisconsin, to be honest with you. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I was camping at a campground. It was the first time I'd seen fireflies, and it was the most amazing experience ever. I'm like, whoa, this is mind-blowing for someone who didn't grow up with it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize they weren't kind of all over the place. We obviously don't have them here in Las Vegas where I live now, but I grew up catching jars of them as a kid, which does sound very cliche now that I say it out loud, but it was, it's kind of magical in the Midwest, and especially up north, it stays light so long in the summers to be like running around with your cousins or friends or whoever as a kid and collecting fireflies, and it's 9 p.m. still light outside. Perfect.
Yeah. So sounds like a pretty standard small town existence. What was your family like?
So they were very hard. Both my parents worked and worked super hard. My dad, when I was a kid, he worked for a logging company and he was gone Monday through Friday over the road. So my mom was holding down the fort, which I'm sure had its challenges at time, but she also worked full time. So I think I got a lot of work ethic from the two of them, and that really helped me out later on. But very like blue collar upbringing. Neither of my parents graduated from college. But I was a pretty good student just all the way through high school. And so they didn't really have a college fund.
I assume this about you. We don't know each other very well, but we've been interacting for a few months now. And I'm like, I bet she was a straight A student.
I was. I hate to fulfill stereotypes, but
no, but you seem very intelligent and hardworking, and that usually adds up. See, I was not intelligent and not hardworking in high school, and I got a 1.87. So,
that's impressive.
Yeah, it was very impressive that you can go that low. You can almost do nothing and get a 2 point. You put off a very hardworking, intelligent vibe, and it's obviously real. And it seems like your parents were hardworking, and working for a logging company that pretty much requires hard work.
It does, and like I said, half the year there, the temperatures are pretty miserable. So being out and about on the roads with large equipment and dealing with ice and breakdowns and all of that stuff, when I get tired and I'm like, I could use a vacation, I feel burned out. I'm like, man, how did my dad do that job for so long?
That's interesting. My dad was in the logging industry too, so we should have a beer and discuss that at some point. Did you said you were into sports, right? Pretty athletic.
So I'm pretty athletic now, and in my adult life, I've been very athletic at various points, but I was kind of an awkward, shy kid. And so team sports, I found super stressful. It's classic small town. You have one public school system.
Mm-hmm.
You have like the movie Mean Girls. That was fairly accurate. And I was definitely like the smart kid that was really shy and quiet. And those girls terrified me. And those were all the ones that like ran the team sports, right?
Right.
So even though I'm 5'10", so I was tall, especially as I got to like late middle school and early high school. I just was like, no, not going to deal with that. So I did do track. I ran track and I threw a shot and discus. And then this is going to make you laugh. I was actually a figure skater for 12 years, which 5'10" makes, I'm like the world's most giant. And I wasn't very good, but it was fun.
In that part of the country, that's a thing, right? I mean, it's hockey and figure skating and all the ice things, right?
Yeah, well, so the reason I ended up in figure skating is because I wanted to play hockey, and there was only a boys team. There was no girls hockey. And so my parents signed me up for figure skating. So I did that, and I still think I would have been much better at hockey. But, sign of the times, there was no girls team. There is now, which is awesome, but
right.
Limited options.
But you were always pretty competitive.
I was. I think I was the closet competitor. Like,
you just hadn't really fully realized it yet, maybe?
Yeah, I think like I said, I was pretty shy, and I had anxiety in social situations. So I kind of hid the competitiveness away, and a way for it to come out was academically. And so I would be, have a 4.0 basically all the time because I could compete against myself for that. The more external competition stuff came out as I became an adult. Started to show.
When did you the social anxiety thing? When did that start kind of dissipating? Because obviously you live, I mean, at least the last several years, a very public life, and now what you're doing now is extremely public. It's like your worst nightmare when you were in high school, probably. Speaking in front of people.
This is so funny. I have a newsletter that's coming out tomorrow, and that's literally what I wrote it about. I don't think it went away. I think I just learned to manage it. And some of it was just being forced to do it and exposure. I remember when I first joined the Thunderbirds, I knew public affairs and doing that stuff was part of the job. But that kind of was just a background thing. I was focused on the flying, and then I show up and I'm learning all these difficult maneuvers and flying super close to other airplanes. And that's stressful in its own right. But the public affairs training was more stressful than any of the flying. And I remember the first time they were like, put me on camera, give me a microphone. And it was just one of our enlisted guys from the team. This isn't a reporter. This video is going nowhere other than for us to like debrief it and see what I could do better. And I was so nervous, and I was like fumbling with my words. And that was, I guess it'll be 4 years ago this fall. So not that long ago. No. And I just got used to it because I was the only female pilot on the team. So I was often sought out for interviews. I would try to fade away into the background sometimes and make the other pilots do them, but they would be like, we want to talk to the girl pilot. So here I am. And I just got comfortable with it eventually. And getting on stage now I'm still nervous, but I don't think it's because I'm worried about them judging me. I think it's because I hold myself to such a high standard. I want my speech to go exactly as I planned it. I want every word to have the impact and the meaning that I wrote it to have. And when I miss a section or like you get off script or out of order, no one else knows, but I know, and that stresses me out.
No, absolutely. That's really interesting. That because I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the people that are in front of the public all the time, whether they're a musician or a speaker or whatever, they often think, wow, that person's like amazing. They're not scared at all. But I think most of the time, because I know a lot of musicians and all of them get nervous.
Mhm.
Every damn single one of them. I don't know one that doesn't have butterflies, especially if they're like, an A plus, like they're going into stadiums of like 20,000, 25,000 people. It doesn't matter who you are. That's nerve wracking. So the difference is like, kind of like what you said, is learning to manage that stress, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I enjoy it. After the fact, I'm like, wow, that was awesome. It's like an energy boost.
Mm-hmm.
But those few minutes right beforehand, when I'm getting introed by whoever's setting up the speech,
Mm-hmm.
or all the crowd is there and I can see them watching the stage, that I do get stressed out during that time period for
Yeah.
sure.
So what do you do? What's your routine? Do you got to do positive self-talk? What's your
I mean, I do the same thing I did when I would get nervous for air shows, which is just take a deep breath and not try to overthink it. I think when I get into a spot where I'm trying to rehearse parts of it right before stepping on stage, that's when I get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, my brain will know what to do as I get to the parts. Like, I've practiced for this, I've rehearsed for this. So I just try to turn off all of that talk about, oh, this is the section you've been getting hung up on. Just take a deep breath, and that's it. I know some speakers have really complex pre-stage routines. I haven't developed one yet. We'll see if one comes with time. But so far, it's just telling myself, it's going to be fine. You've prepared for this.
Do you find when you are flying or when you're speaking that if you kind of overcook it and over prepare it, sometimes you'll make mistakes, as opposed to, you do all your preparation in advance and then you sort of let I don't want to say your subconscious, because you have to be conscious, but like there's a fine balance. I find with myself that sometimes when I over prepare, it goes worse than when I just prepare just the right amount. And then I just take, like you say, take that breath and let all the preparation go to work, as opposed to trying to force it to be perfect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a window in there as you start to get close to the actual event when you have to just stop consciously preparing and thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
and give your brain a break for a second,
Mm-hmm.
let everything sink in
Mm-hmm.
before you do it. Because I think you can prepare a ton in advance, but you don't want to be doing it when it's game time.
For sure. And the stakes when you're flying are obviously really high. Sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, I know nothing about flying other than I've sit in the back of United Airlines planes, but I've watched some of your stuff on YouTube and on your Instagram, and sometimes we're talking a game of inches.
Yep.
So, if one little small mistake is devastation, right?
Yeah, high repercussion for sure. I mean, the worst case right now, I trip and fall off the stage, which
Right.
the audience would probably find funny. Yeah, so I guess I shouldn't be nervous at all now. I should tell myself that, like, hey, you've had way worse chances of high stakes repercussions than you have now. But yeah, we work our way into flying that close together, so we don't
Right.
start there on day one.
I hope not. I would for sure crash if that was the case. How did you know you wanted to fly? When did that happen?
So there's been a couple times in my life where there's been something that I've seen and it's like piqued my interest a little bit, and then I've just kind of filed it away. And I didn't even realize at the time that it was something I really wanted to do. And when people ask me how I got into the Thunderbirds and into being a fighter pilot, I would tell a story about I was already in ROTC to pay for college. We went on a base visit. I saw two F-15s take off in full afterburner, and it was dusk, so the afterburner flame was just like glowing out the back. It's like the jet noise just like vibrates your whole body like a bass does. And it just gave me goosebumps. It was such a visceral reaction. And I was already in a place where I was kind of checking off the steps to go do that if I wanted to. And it was that made me decide, okay, I'm going to set that as a goal and actually go after it. And I thought that was kind of my first time like making that decision. And then last year, actually, my mom sent me a photo. She was cleaning out some stuff and she had found some artwork that I had done when I was in either late elementary school or early middle school, where you make like clay models, and then they fire them in the kiln and you get to
Mm-hmm.
glaze them and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little F-16 with an afterburner coming out the back, like single tail, looks
No
just
way.
like the Viper. And I was like, huh, interesting. So I think I was just drawn to like adventurous, exciting, challenging
Mm-hmm.
endeavors, and that's kind of how it ended up taking shape, even though I didn't consciously set a goal of becoming a pilot or a fighter pilot until I was already in college.
Did you ever have a fear of flying, like if you flew with your family or the first time you were flying, like I'm assuming Cessnas and things of that nature? No?
So I had no general aviation experience. I had only flown commercially, with the exception of, I think I got one exposure flight in a Cessna when I was like a freshman in college.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I had never flown in anything small.
So
And
when was the first time you flew an airplane?
so physically at the controls, already in the Air Force pilot training pipeline.
Like how old were you?
22, 23.
Okay. It's confusing to me as a bystander, like because it's really hard to become a fighter. There's, I mean,
Yeah.
it's extremely difficult, right? So how does one like? Because I'm assuming there's a lot of people that want to do it, especially now with the new Top Gun movie, right? I heard that recruitment's like way up right now.
Yeah.
Um, but there's very high standards, right? Like you can't just say, "Oh, I like to fly. I saw these jets take off. I'm going to be a fighter pilot."
Yep, that's not how it happens at all. I wish it was that easy. Actually, it's good that it's not that easy.
Right.
Yeah, so I went into pilot training. So rewind to seeing those aircraft fly in
Hmm.
college. Around junior year, early senior year, they will ask who here wants to compete to get a pilot slot. So I was like, yep, sign me up for that. And they look at your grades, your leadership in the cadet wing, physical fitness, all that stuff. So I ended up getting one. I go off to pilot training. They first send you through a 1 month long screening program where you fly a really tiny airplane called a DA-20. And that was my first time at the controls, trying to understand the systems, talking on the radio, learning how the airspace works. I soloed in that airplane. And honestly, looking back at all the formal training programs I went through, including the F-16, including spinning up for the Thunderbirds, for me personally, that initial flight screening was the most difficult because I had no foundation and no background, and it's trying to drink from a fire hose.
Did they make you do a bunch of book work before you got in this airplane? Okay.
Oh yeah, but it's just the program's only a month long, so it's rapid fire. I remember staying until midnight every night trying to study, knowing I had to wake up at 5 a.m. the next morning, and being super stressed out. And I think that was the first time ever where I thought I might not actually make it through a program, which had never happened before.
Right.
It turned out I actually did well in it, but the whole time I was there, I thought I was about to fail out. But yeah, the study habits, go back to being a straight A student. I think those, if I hadn't had that kind of time management and just habits already built, I think I would have really, really struggled.
You must be a detail person.
I like to plan, I would say, which my husband makes fun of me for. He never even knows like where we're going, what time our flight leaves, what hotel we're staying at. So I do all of that. But yeah, I would say that's probably accurate.
My wife always, because sometimes I'm like, I'd love to be a bush pilot or something. I think that'd be kind of fun. Fly beavers into lakes and stuff. I think that would be the ultimate adventure. If I didn't have kids and if I was like a 20 something and I could do it all over again, I would consider that. But she always goes, you are never allowed to be a pilot because I fly pretty high level. I'm not very organized. Like I'm a kind of a spacey guy. And she's like, I would never trust you to fly the airplane that I'm in. You're not detail oriented enough. So I always wonder if every pilot's pretty detail oriented because there's so much you got to think about. Even just repeating things into the radio, like when you're coming in for a landing or whatever, like remembering all the numbers and the stations you're switching to and all that. Like I would screw something up.
Yeah, I mean it just takes practice. So I will not name him, but a fellow Thunderbird pilot, there's only 6 of us, so it's not too hard to figure out. He was like the I don't even know what word to use. The spaciest, like ditziest, if that's still acceptable to say, like guy on the ground. Him and his wife have 4 kids, and she's a saint because she kept everything together. He would do the dumbest stuff on the ground. And then he was an absolutely incredible pilot. And I'm just like, what goes on in your brain? So we would always joke, we're like, you are the smartest dumb person I know. He was just such a good pilot. And then you get him in other random situations. He would never know what we were supposed to be doing next.
Is it just a hand-eye coordination thing or a gut thing? Like he's just...
He's an anomaly. He would lock his keys in his car all the time. Like just stuff like that. You're just
okay. Yeah, that's what I do. Yep.
So there's still hope for you if at some point.
All right. Maybe I'll try it.
Yeah. Learn to fly float planes. I want to learn to fly float planes. That looks awesome.
Oh yeah. I mean, is my ultimate flying dream to sit in the back of a fighter jet? Yes. Will it ever happen? No. But, yeah, I think my span to do that is over. I'm 41 and I think I have plenty of hobbies. So why criminal law? I
was attracted to kind of the protector jobs, which I guess is why I ended up in the military, and something exciting and kind of badass. And I think I watched a lot of shows growing up where they were like kicking open doors, and I just found that appealing. And I was always really fascinated by true crime stuff as well, just like books and shows and now podcasts. There's so many, but yeah, so that was kind of what I wanted to do. I was like, criminal justice, that's it.
Wow. And how far did you get into that before? How long? What was that span when you kind of changed directions, timeline wise?
Yeah, so I saw those jets take off and decided that was something I wanted to pursue probably 2 years into college. Okay. But I actually graduated with a criminal justice degree.
Oh, wow. That's
what my degree is in.
So you could have gone to law school.
I could have. A lot of pre-law people were in the program with me. I could have gone to law school. I could have gone to federal law enforcement. Like there were all kinds of options that I was attracted to on that side, but took a little detour and threw my hat in the ring to become a pilot, and it worked out.
Okay, so you did this month of training, and then what? Then what happens? You got to go to like a boot camp of some type, or what?
So you already do that, like just the marching, people yelling at you, doing lots of push-ups back during the summer while you're actually in ROTC in college. But I went off to the formal pilot training program at that point. So the 30-day screening program is done through a contractor out in Colorado. Everyone goes through it there, and then they head to their specific pilot training bases. So I went off to Mississippi, and I actually spent 2 years at that base. There's a bunch of training on the end that makes it longer. Water survival, SEER, which is up at Fairchild. So that's survival school, which is real fun. And then the actual year-long program itself. So you learn to fly a prop plane for about 6 months, the T6.
Yeah.
And we split into different tracks from there, either the heavy track, which that's what people that go on to fly tankers, cargo aircraft, they all go through that path. And then you have the other track, which is fighter bomber, setting you up for that. So
how long between when you go to that your base in Mississippi and when you're actually sitting in the pilot seat of a fighter jet for the first time?
Like 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then a year of specific training for the F-16 before you go off to your first squadron.
Gotcha. But do you have to do a bunch of simulator stuff, or how does that work? Okay.
Oh yeah. The first entire maybe quarter to third of any of those courses is all academic stuff, learning the systems of the jet, learning about weather, aerodynamics, the airspace for like the FAA rules, all of that stuff. And then simulators all the time, from how to handle emergencies to how to land to flying instrument approaches. So there's a bunch of simulator work at the beginning.
And did you have to spend time in the air in the back seat before you could be in the front seat?
No. So everything, I flew the T6 and then the T-38, which are the 2 training aircraft in the main program. I was, as the student, would be in the front seat, and then an instructor would be in the back seat.
Okay.
And so they have the ability to take over the controls. It's almost like driver's ed, where your teacher is sitting next to you and they have their own set of brake pedals.
Right. Yeah.
So they would take the jet from you if you got yourselves into an unsafe situation. And so there's a lot of that happens at the beginning, and then you get to a point where they're just back there not touching anything.
Your first time sitting on the runway in the actual physical airplane after the simulator, and you're like in the pilot seat, like what was that feeling like? I have to imagine you're like, holy shit, here we go.
Yeah. So I remember in the T6, which was the first airplane in the Air Force pipeline after the screening program. I remember that ride specifically, and I was just so excited. My instructor was an older guy who was a reservist who had been flying forever, and he was like giving me this pep talk about not being nervous and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I was just 100% excited because I had worked to get to that position for so long. And then I also remember my first flight in the F-16 specifically. And oddly enough, I was still excited, but there was a lot more stress involved in that one because you're already a pilot at that point. You're just going into a more difficult airframe. So there's already a pretty high expectation for performance on that first flight. And I just remember being like, okay, what's next? Like, what's next on the checklist? And then what am I going to do? And so there's a lot more stress involved, not as much just joy of being in such a cool position.
Right. So, I mean, what were the extra pressures they put on you for that flight specifically?
So the very first time you fly, no one expects you to really know anything. Like, you've studied for it, of course, but they expect everyone to be very bad at it. Going to the F-16, I think we had between 4 to 6 flights with an instructor in the back seat before we were flying by ourselves in a single seat model with no support there at all. And it's a $30 million airplane. So yeah, high repercussions, right? And it's really difficult to land as well, or land well. That takes a lot of practice. So
why is that?
It's just it's an engine strapped to a person, basically. A stubby wing, tons of thrust. It's very light compared to the amount of power that the engine has. Right. So it's kind of inherently unstable and touchy at those slow airspeeds as you're coming into land. I got to the point where I was very used to it, and the physical flying part kind of just became second nature. But at first, it's a big jump from what you've been flying previously.
So the other aircraft was much easier to fly out, sounds like.
Yeah, and you don't fly quite as fast. Things are happening a little bit slower. So it's a leap.
When was the first time you broke the sound barrier?
Trying to think if we ever went supersonic in pilot training. The funny thing, I mean, I've gone supersonic a bunch of times, but they don't really stand out because in the cockpit, nothing happens. The Mach number just goes from 0.99 to 1.0. And
you can't tell the difference?
Nope, can't tell at all.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Everyone expects something really exciting to happen, which you get the sonic boom on the outside. So we're only allowed to do it like high in airspace over unpopulated areas. But we would fly supersonic on a regular basis doing training for like air to air fights. And you'd be like, oh, yep, supersonic, check.
How many miles per hour is, I don't know what the conversion is from a Mach to miles an hour.
Well, it depends on your elevation and the density, altitude, all that stuff. But in general, like at an air show, high 600s as far as knots, so around 700 miles an hour.
Is the sound barrier?
Yeah, generally in that region.
Gotcha.
But the F-16 can go twice the speed of sound.
Whew.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that?
No, you don't want to. I personally don't want to take it to like its actual limit.
Right.
And also you'd have to be like in a dive, in full afterburner. And I don't know, the jets are kind of getting old at this point. I'm like, there's just no reason to push it that much.
And then, so you become a pilot. You're now flying solo in the upgraded airplane. I read somewhere that you actually had to go to combat?
Yep. So that was quite a few years, I guess about 4 years into flying the F-16.
Okay.
After training, I was stationed down in Texas in Fort Worth, and I got to deploy to Afghanistan with that squadron, which was actually one of the highlights of my career. I wish I could have gone more than just the one time. The timing just never worked out with moving to different units and all of that. But it was rewarding to actually be doing the thing that you trained for 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's that like? You're stationed over there at a base, I assume, and you're kind of on standby, I assume, just like any other soldier. You're probably performing daily duties and all these things, but in terms of actual combat, obviously that's probably not happening every single day. In the air from an air perspective, I don't know any. I've never been to combat.
Yeah. So in Afghanistan, I was at Bagram, and we're doing close air support. So our missions are to take out targets on the ground to support the American or our allies, troops that are on the ground. And so we would fly almost every day for 4 to 6 hours at a time. So there would always be aircraft airborne. And sometimes you would have a pre-planned mission that you got to see imagery for, you got briefed on by intel, you knew exactly where the targets were, what they looked like, all of that. You could figure out what weapons you were going to drop, and you could make a plan. That would happen occasionally if they had some target that needed to be taken out. More common, I would say, is that you were airborne and you'd get a radio call that you'd been retasked to go to a different location in the country because there are troops in contact. So you might get an urgent radio call like, hey, we're pulling a tanker over for you to air refuel, like head to this coordinate, and you're off to the races. And on the drive there, you're trying to figure out as much about the situation as you can, because once you show up, it can be very busy and very confusing when stuff's already going on as to who is where and who's shooting at who and what the enemy has as far as weapons. And so that was like the more common situation, but that did not happen every day by any means.
Right. Were you ever involved in a air-to-air battle?
No, so luckily the Taliban and ISIS doesn't have any.
Yeah, right. So I guess that's true.
Good. That would be. I'm not super confident in their ability to organize an air force, so we'd probably be fine. Right. But I mean, we trained to that. Yeah. So we trained to that on a regular basis because there are obviously countries that we could find ourselves interacting with that do have air forces. So
for sure.
It's been a while since there's been any air-to-air combat, but if it happens, the Air Force is ready.
Right. That seems very stressful, like going from training mode to war mode, obviously, for anybody serving. So that first time you were in the air above an active war zone, did you find yourself staying very calm and just going through the process that you trained for, or did you have any freak out moments? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so just generally flying over the country was fairly surreal because you would see people shooting below you. I flew at night a lot, and if you put the NVGs on, the night vision goggles, you would see tracer rounds going all over the place. It was like everyone was shooting at everyone. It was just the Wild West when I was there. And I wasn't really concerned about what I was going to do in the airplane. For the first time ever, I was like, I only have one engine. Like, what if something was to go wrong with it?
Right.
Even though in the 2,000 hours that I flew, I never had any serious engine issues. But you do have that moment where you're like, I have an ejection seat, which I'm very confident in its ability to work, but I really don't want to eject here and land on the ground and be trying to hide and get picked up. And so I thought about that more than I had ever before. In actual engagements where you're trying to figure out what's going on, what the target is. I had one that really sticks out where we always go places with another aircraft. So a wingman, we have mutual support with each other. So my wingman and I got called in to support some Afghan troops on the ground. And we were, watching the enemy place an IED, and like you could see him place it, you could see him bury it on the road, all this stuff.
And you're circling why this has happened or something?
Okay. Yeah, we're several. They don't know we're there. We're like high enough they can't hear us.
Wow, that must be really high.
Yeah, like 20,000 feet.
Yeah.
So, but we have sensors and stuff, pods that we can look at things. If you go on YouTube and you watch any of the weapons impacts like that are in black and white, those are all IR pods. So we have something similar.
Right.
And my wingman was a lieutenant, so he was less experienced than I was. I was the flight lead. And you're trying to plan this out because you're waiting to get clearance to drop. There's, guys on the ground in some headquarters that are watching the same feed that you are from different sensors on different airplanes that are trying to get to a point where they're like, okay, we want to take these guys out, because we don't have the autonomy to just do that on our own.
Right.
Unless like Americans are actively being harmed and we can see it, then you have the ability to use your decision making and be like, I'll take whatever repercussions come from this.
Right.
But that wasn't the case in this scenario. So you're trying to time out when you're going to send each aircraft to the tanker to air refuel. So there's a tanker aircraft nearby. You can go get gas and come back. It probably takes you, 20 minutes or something to do that. And there's two of us. So I send my wingman to the tanker because he has to refuel. And as soon as he leaves, the guy on the radio is like, all right, you're clear. Like, we got clearance. You're good to go. Like, call in with direction and I'll give free clearance on final. I'm like, okay. So the weapon we were using, we had planned on doing something where I had to use some guidance system on his aircraft to guide in the weapon physically coming off of my aircraft. And he's gone now. So that was stressful because you can do both from one platform, but it's very difficult and a lot more likely that things will go wrong, that you'll miss the target, whatever. And then all of a sudden a voice that I hadn't heard before, I didn't even know was anywhere nearby, comes on the radio and is like, hey, I can provide laser guidance for your weapon. I'm like, who is this? And there was a UAV, a drone that was overhead, and they're like, cool, we've been listening this whole time. We know what's going on. Just tell us when you're rolling in and we'll guide it in. And it was stressful because I just made a leap from, here's the plan, this is what we've trained to, like, we've been talking about this for 30 minutes. And now I have this unknown person that I have to trust. And if the weapon misses and hits something it's not supposed to, that's going to be partially on me, even if I'm not the one that's controlling its guidance. So we shacked the target, which means we hit it, and our weapons effects were achieved, if you will. So those people were no longer planting any IEDs, but that one was stressful for sure. It was at night. I was by myself working with people I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, I always wonder like what the interaction between because drones are obviously very prominent now. The interaction between drones and actually sort of aircraft with actual people in them and obviously I don't expect any details of that, but that's crazy. What an intense time there, and you were flying almost every day. You said you were there for months, right? A few months?
Yeah, 4 months I think on that one.
Okay. And then you had to come home, and then what happened?
Then I went back to just normal training. I mean, you get a little bit of time off, take a vacation if you can, and then you're back to just training all the different mission sets, which that close air support that we were doing there is just one of many. We kind of talked about air to air. There's a bunch of different stuff the F-16 can do. So it's one of the cool things about flying that platform, that multi-role, it can do all the missions. It's also one of the very difficult things because it's really hard to stay proficient in all of them.
Yeah, because the planes have come a long ways since those, because those were originally made in the 80s, 90s?
Yeah. Back in the 80s.
And now we have F-35s. Is that F-35s, the new one?
F-22s, yep.
Yeah, and so once you train in a platform, I mean, I'm imagining if you'd have stayed in the service, you'd have probably ended up working your way up to the newer platforms, or no? Do they just keep you in the platform that you're proficient at and that's your thing, and then they train new pilots for the newer stuff, or how does that work?
Kind of a mix of both. The F-22 and the F-35 have been around long enough now that there are new pilots going directly into those airframes. There are a lot of F-16 pilots that are switching over to the F-35 just as more airplanes become available and they need pilots that are more experienced and the instructors and that kind of thing. So I think there would have been potential to go over to the F-35 if I had stayed, but usually you'll stay in the same airframe for most of your career.
Now, is there an Air Force version of Top Gun school?
Yeah, weapons school. It's actually here in Las Vegas. It's at Nellis Air Force
Oh,
Base,
wow.
which same place the Thunderbirds are based out of.
Okay.
Um, and we always give them a hard time because our weapons school is actually longer than theirs. And so we are always like, our program is more intense than yours. And we just didn't make a movie about it.
Right. With, men with their shirts off playing
Yeah.
volleyball. If
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, we tend to not play volleyball in jeans, topless. It's not that I've seen, at
My
least.
wife got home from the movie here 2 days ago. She's like, I was really pleased that they put the football. Have you seen it, by the way?
Oh yeah, I went like a week before it launched. I got an early screening, which was super cool.
Yeah.
Miles Teller, yeah, that was good casting.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife's like, I'm glad they put the football scene in. I'm like, look, they had to. They had to do the football
Yep.
scene. And it was, I can't believe they did it in a way that it was so cheesy. It wasn't cheesy in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, wow, this is extremely cheesy, but therefore it's not that cheesy because I totally expected it.
I feel like that was the whole movie.
Yeah, it was. And
It's an incredibly fine line to walk, so I was impressed.
yeah, absolutely. No, and I actually like it a little bit better than the first one, to be honest
Yeah,
with you,
same.
which is like, just stop now. Stop now. Don't do any more. I mean, I know Goose's son is going to grow up now and like something's going to happen there. Maybe they'll have a Top Gun 3. But
Gotta wait like 30 years.
so now the Thunderbirds. Tell me a little bit about the Thunderbirds. How did you get chosen to be on the Thunderbirds?
So I had mentioned earlier, there were a few times in my life where something had like piqued my interest, but I'd never admitted to myself or anyone else that was something I wanted to do. Cue the Thunderbirds. I had seen the team fly a couple times.
Mhm.
I had been asked a couple times if it was something I was ever interested in doing. And when I was asked those times, I wasn't experienced enough to even apply. I didn't have enough hours in the
Mhm.
jet. And so I had been like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And in hindsight, now that I've reflected back on it, I didn't think I was a good enough pilot to be on the team. Like, that was my initial reaction. It's like, I'm not going to go after that because I'm probably going to fail. I'm not good enough. And then I was getting to the end of my assignment in Texas, and I'd done a lot of things while stationed there to kind of force myself outside my comfort zone and get comfortable with taking more risks and putting myself out there more.
Mhm.
And talking about that social anxiety thing, trying to like push past that and
Right.
being so concerned about what other people were thinking of me and if they were going to judge me and all this stuff. So I was working on that. And I'd already had actually assignment to go to New Mexico, my follow on to Texas. And I was figuring out when I would get picked up or when I would show up, when my stuff would get picked up from my house. I was like about to move in the next few months. And I saw an email come out from the Thunderbirds, and it was like, last chance to apply for the team. The deadline closes in like 3 days. And I apparently had just deleted or never opened the first email they sent out, where you have like a month or 6 weeks to get your application package ready. I saw the very last one. And for whatever reason, I opened it and read it for the first time ever. I was like, I actually meet all of these requirements. And this sounds pretty cool. And so I went to my boss that same day and I was like, hey, what do you think about me applying for the Thunderbirds? And he was just like a really great mentor. I was super supportive. And he was like, what do you need to make it happen? Let's do it. And so we jumped through some hoops because it was such a short timeline to get all of the letters of recommendation and pull all my records. And it was like 50 pages of stuff that I had to send in.
Wow.
And we sent it in and I got hired.
Wow. How was that, like a letter they sent you or a phone call, or how'd that work?
Phone call. Yeah, it was 6 months later.
Oh, wow.
About 30 of us applied. 12 of us got chosen based on our records as semifinalists and went out in person. And the first interview weekend, we shadowed the team on the road. So we went to an air show that the current team was at. We got to see all the behind the scenes stuff because it's not for everyone and they want to make sure you know what you're getting into. And then we did some formal interviews. A lot of it was just socializing with the current team and them trying to feel out personalities.
Oh, like a culture fit type deal?
Yeah, because we're a small group. There's 6 pilots that fly in the demo. There's 12 officers total, and those 12 people, you're on the road with them 240 days a year.
Oh my God.
You see them more than you see your family. So
that's crazy.
You can't have anyone that's got like a really difficult personality to deal with.
No, absolutely not.
That is like the worst thing on the team when there's personality conflict.
Are you guys you're living in hotels?
Yep. So everyone has their own hotel room. So you can escape to your hotel, which I did on a regular basis, and stop responding to messages and like, you guys have fun going out wherever you're going out. I'm not coming with. But it's a lot. So that's a big part of it is personality fit. And then from the 12 of us, 6 got picked as finalists. And like a month or 6 weeks later, we came back out for another show. We did interviews with all the current officers, the general that leads the base here at Nellis. And then it was another month or so of waiting to hear. And I got a phone call. I remember that distinctly. That was an exciting day.
So then you have to train to fly like that. I mean, you know how to fly, but that's a whole different type of flying, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
More stunt oriented.
It's completely different. Again, drinking from a fire hose. It was a steep learning curve, stressful 4 months. I flew about 100 graded flights in 4 months. Wow. So it was busy. It was a lot to learn, and it was stuff you think you'd be good at because you've already been flying this aircraft for 6 years plus. So turns out you're not just good at it. It takes practice.
Did you have to have somebody get back in the plane with you and like actually, like in case you made mistakes, or was this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Especially the close close formation flying. It's again very high repercussion. They want you to fight to get into position, but it's a very fine line between fighting to get in position and get back in position when you fall out to not hitting the airplane next to you. So you definitely have to have someone in the back seat that's like shadowing the controls. And I mean, as I left the team, I was the person in the back seat shadowing the controls. And that might have been more stressful than when I was in the front seat learning. Yeah. Because I was like, at least in the front seat, you have that safety net back there. You're like, that person will save me if I royally screw this up. And I'm like, oh crap, that's me now. Like I have to find that line of letting him learn and like make mistakes and push his limit, but keeping us safe. And that can be a very fine line to identify.
I have to ask you this. Did you ever go out in the ocean in a boat when you were a kid?
Just as a passenger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get seasick?
So I do get passively seasick. I don't throw up, but I do get passively.
You get queasy.
Oh yeah. Yep, for sure.
That's what happens to me. I've only thrown up once, but it doesn't matter if I have a patch or whatever. I just don't feel very good.
Yep.
It just so you had to deal with that to be in this profession, I assume.
So it was never a factor until the very end of my career when I was the person riding in the back seat training someone to learn the Thunderbird solo maneuvers, which are very aggressive flying. I would get like queasy feeling in the back seat. But in my entire career, when I was at the controls, I never once got sick.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
It's like when you're driving the car versus when you're in the passenger seat, like people get car sick. You have something to focus on. You aren't heads down. You know, because I think a lot of times people like will be on their phones or reading or whatever, and that will make them sick.
Right.
The backseat was not my favorite place to be. That's for sure.
What about like, and I know this is exaggerated and probably super stupid, but you know, when you're watching a movie like Top Gun, they talk about like people passing out because of the G-force and stuff like that. Do you ever deal with anything like that?
That is the biggest. This is probably not the best way to say it. That is the biggest killer of F-16 pilots.
Yeah.
G-locking. We only have one pilot. There's no one in the back seat.
G-locking. That's what it's called.
Yeah. G-induced loss of consciousness. So I have friends that have G-locked and hit the ground, and I have been very close to G-locking myself. I've never actually done it. I know other people who have done it and woken back up and saved themselves before hitting the ground. It's a big deal. It's something we take super seriously, and you are always operating on the edge when you're at the high G limits. For us, 9 Gs is what the jet could pull. And I pulled that every single, I I got better as I got more experience as a Thunderbird pilot at making the maneuver look the same and making a little bit lower G for myself just to save my body because it's super hard on your back and your neck.
So you start getting risk as you get to that 8, 9, 10 area. Is that kind of where or can it happen anywhere?
So anything above 6, I would say people can G-lock at.
And you don't know. I mean, right? That's kind of
yeah. So we would fly people in the back seat that have never been in a high performance aircraft before, and we would try very hard to not G-lock them. They would throw up fairly often, but G-locking was fairly rare because you'd ease them into it because most people don't know what to expect. They're like, I don't know what 6 Gs feels like. So they'd do like 4 Gs on takeoff and they'd be like, okay, how was that? And they're like, oh, it was fine. And then they'd be like, all right, we're going to do 6. And then they could decide if they wanted to go for 9, which is the max that the jet can pull at that point. But your body is, I was so impressed by this. Just like your body can adapt to like endurance training or strength training. If you are pulling Gs on a regular basis, like daily or several times a week, your G tolerance will go up and you don't have to work as hard doing the G strain where you're like squeezing your legs and like doing the weird breathing exchange. You still have to do that, but you don't have to do it as hard because I think just your body adapts, your heart rate adapts, your blood vessels adapt. It's pretty cool to see happen.
What is the protocol if you feel yourself slipping into that state? You just mentioned a few things that I don't think anybody knows about. Squeezing your legs and what's the breathing?
Yeah. So the G strain is what it's called. They didn't really show it on Top Gun because it's not sexy. It's very awkward and like you don't want a video of yourself doing it. But you can like if you go on YouTube and you search Air Force centrifuge. If you remember from like the movie Armageddon or Space Cowboys, they put them in that like capsule at the end of the arm in that round room. It spins super fast.
Yep.
So we do that, and there's videos of all kinds of people going through that on YouTube, so you can see the effects of the G's, like your face, like being melted. But you cannot stay awake above 6 Gs without doing something. So
really,
you wear a suit. It looks like a giant pair of snow pants, and it's got air bladders in the legs, and those inflate. It's plugged into the jet, and air goes in there, and they inflate. It's like a giant blood pressure cuff for your whole lower body.
It like compresses your
legs. So it compresses. There's one on your stomach and then on your quads and your hamstrings and then like around your calves. And because the way you're sitting in the jet, the G forces are going from your head towards your feet. And so the force is so strong, it's stronger than your heart's ability to pump blood to your brain. And so when you get to that point, the blood's going to leave your brain and you're going to go unconscious. So that's what happens.
That's G-lock.
Yep, that's G-lock.
Okay.
And so to keep the blood up, you'll squeeze your lower body, imagining like a tube of toothpaste. The blood goes back up instead of pooling in your lower extremities. And then the G suit only gives you a G to a G and a half of additional tolerance. So now we're at 7.5 Gs, and we would pull just over 9. And that additional little bit is all on you. That's the G strain. So that is physically squeezing your muscles in your legs, and you're pushing with your stomach against the G suit. It's like a full lower body flex to, again, help squeeze that blood up.
Does that automatically initiate once you hit a certain point for you? You don't have to think about it.
Exactly. And that's like one of the big things that they train you when you're new to a high G aircraft is like, you're going to have so much going on. This just has to happen like breathing happens. You don't have the time to think about it. Gotcha.
So every time you get over, say, 6 Gs, this thing initiates on your stomach and your legs, and it helps protect you from G-lock.
Yep.
But if you didn't have it, you almost be guaranteed to go into G-lock.
Yeah. So you get good at doing the G strain, but you also, I realized that the G suit inflating, which is just done through the air, like, no, I don't have to do anything. It's just sequenced through the airplane. As it hits a certain G number, it starts to inflate. So that would cue you. You wouldn't realize it was, but that G suit inflating and starting to squeeze your legs would cue your brain to be like, okay, I need to like start straining. I flew with the Blue Angels in the back seat with their lead solo, and they don't wear G suits. and they pull less G's. So they'll only go up to 7.5. So they're able to do that just using a G strain without the suit. And so they don't wear them. And so I didn't have a G suit on flying with them. And I was like, oh, okay, I pull 9 Gs on a daily basis. Like this should be fine. And I almost G locked at 7.5 with them because it's almost like I'd been lifting with a weight belt my entire life. And now someone's like, go do squats without a weight belt. Like your muscles are just like, I don't know how to turn on and cue. And it was very eye-opening.
What makes the determination for them not to go over 7.5, but you can go to 9? Is that just a Navy thing, or is it
different airplanes, just different?
Copy. Gotcha. That's insane. I just don't know how much. I mean, even just talking about this, I get queasy. Seriously. If I talk, and I love going out in the ocean, it drives me crazy that it makes me seasick because I think it's awesome and I love fishing out there and stuff. But even just talking about it or looking at it makes me queasy. So, and watching Top Gun, I got queasy.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't take up aerobatic flying.
But I still want to fly in one. It's a dream of mine, Mace.
Well, you should go do just a back seat or a front seat, whatever they do. Just a ride in like an extra, just a civilian aerobatic plane. I'm sure there are people near you that have companies that do rides. There's a bunch here in Vegas. They're like all over the place.
Oh my God. I don't know if I trust those yahoos.
Yeah, read the review. Yeah. Make sure there's no articles on recent crashes. You'll be fine.
So when did you decide that you wanted to start kind of working your way out of this and pursuing a whole nother world?
So I pretty much knew when I joined the Thunderbirds, you owe the Air Force 10 years after pilot training.
Oh, wow.
So pilot training takes about 2 years from the time I commissioned, which is the same day I graduated college, to get through. So it ended up being about 12 years. And at the end of that 10-year contract, that's your first time in your whole adult life, you've all of a sudden had a chance to decide now. Like, I don't think most people realize as college students how much your life evolves from the age of 21 to the age of 33.
Oh my God. We could
right?
we could do a couple hours on that.
Yeah, right. Sure. I know those are such transformative years. And so I'd kind of really found some hobbies that I loved, and I loved the people that were in them as well. It was just like a whole different community outside of the community that I'd always been part of. Even though the Air Force fighter pilot community is incredible, like everyone has each other's backs. The trust is amazing. Everyone's very good at their jobs. I'm a little bit more of like a free spirit, I would say. And so the older I got, the longer I was in my career, I felt a little bit held back by having someone else make all the decisions for me and tell me what I was going to do next and set objectives for me. And I just wanted more freedom than that. And I kind of started to see that, and it only got stronger as I got older. And so I was kind of planning on leaving already. And then I met my husband on Bumble, of all places, when I moved here to Vegas. And he has a 9-year-old son, so I have a stepson, and he's incredible. And so we're fairly set on staying in Vegas just to manage that whole thing. And so I'm like, well, active duty moves you around every 3 years, and I'm just not willing to do that anymore.
And the travel schedule with the Thunderbirds, right?
Was insane. Yeah. Nothing like, meeting your husband, getting married 6 months later while you're in the first few months of your very first show season, and then having your first 3 years of marriage be me on the road for 240 days a year. That's aggressive.
Not chances of success are low, right?
I mean, we're doing great, but it was hard, right? I was actually kind of jealous of the people that didn't have significant others or families. I think they enjoy their assignment a little bit more because they don't have any of that guilt of being gone or feel like they're trying to make everyone happy and still like do well at their job. And
absolutely,
I mean, it's tough on families for sure.
I mean, on the music side, which is a tour, like a true touring musician, they'll have a similar amount of time on the road. Look, most of those men and women are in their 20s, and and some of them are married, And some of them are lucky that they make enough that they can bring their family with them. But there's a lot. It's really hard to keep a relationship being on the road that much. Yeah, I get it. And also you get to the point where you've done it enough, where you just want to kind of, you become more of a homebody. I think the older you get, like I traveled a lot, over the last 15 years, just by nature of my career. And I love it. I miss it when I'm not doing it. Like I like the adventure of it, but I also love having a cup of coffee at my house.
Yes.
And I love going to bed in my own bed.
Yes.
And when I'm traveling now, I miss it more than I used to. A lot more than now my kids are older, I want to see my wife. Like, I don't know. It's just, I think as I'm getting older, and then the towns we live in are getting smaller. Like I want to be around less people and spend more time at home. I feel like I'm becoming a bit of a recluse. So I totally understand it. So, and I hear you when you say freedom, like freedom was the best word that I just heard. And it rings true for entrepreneurship is about, I think it's kind of about chasing freedom and like, placing all responsibilities on your shoulders, but at least giving yourself a fighting chance to have that creative freedom or financial freedom or whatever type of freedom you're seeking. It could be many different types of freedom, right? So at what point did you specifically identify though that you wanted to, you're speaking now, you are writing, you're starting to put out, is that a weekly newsletter or is it?
Yeah, I put it out every 2 weeks. I actually put out content every single day on LinkedIn, which it's been awesome. Like I've grown the community there and it's actually led to speaking engagements and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really demanding at first, but now it's just become routine.
I've always wondered about that platform because, if you follow people like Gary Vee, they're like, LinkedIn. I haven't spent any time at all building an audience there. Nor do I know if it's right for me or not, but yeah, that makes sense for what you're doing. Cause you're probably speaking to companies, corporate stuff.
The very first one was at a private school, like high school, middle school. But then since I've gone to doing corporate speaking, the goal is to really get to a spot where the industry pays really well. And it's like, once you get established, it does give you a lot of freedom. I would love to be in a spot where, I can do 2 to 4 corporate keynotes a month and then have the financial flexibility and the schedule flexibility to be able to do some of the nonprofit presentations. Because I have like ROTC squadrons or Civil Air Patrol or like women's groups, all these organizations that reach out to me all the time and want me to speak. And I just can't do them all for free because this is my job now. I have to make a living. So I'm trying to build it out where I am in a spot where I can do some of both. And I also have a couple charities I'm involved in. I would love to be able to put more time into those. So what you said about freedom, that's exactly it. I have been asked so many times by people, why didn't you go to the airlines and fly? Because that pays really well. And they're like, why don't you go fly corporate? What? And every aviation paid job, though, I am now tied to someone else's schedule. And working for myself has been uncertain at points. It's feast or famine, right? There's been days where I'm just like, this is incredible. I'm like going to make more money than I made in my active duty, all this stuff. I'm like, oh, there's so much potential here. And then there'll be times when I look at the schedule in the summer, which is the slow time for speaking. And I all of a sudden get like really stressed out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have not a lot of certain income in the next couple of months. Like this is the first time I've ever found myself in this position. But I have discovered that if I just keep doing the things I need to do, like keep developing my speech, making it better, keep building networks, keep putting out that content on LinkedIn, as insignificant as that seems, all of a sudden you'll get an email or a phone call and they're like, hey, this is insert Fortune 500 company. Are you available to speak next week? And then I've made more in one speech than I made in a whole month on active duty. And it's like, okay.
Did you find yourself when that started happening, like the first time you saw one of those checks, going, holy crap, like, I guess I just never realized how much money there is and how much opportunity there is out there, like beyond, because, you know,
Yes.
the first part of all of our lives, most of our lives, unless you're lucky and you can, you know, you're like a natural entrepreneur, like a Elon Musk or something. But most of us have to work for other people to learn sort of discipline. And like, there's a lot of things you need to learn. Like when you're in your 20s, you don't know shit. And I didn't, but if you do, God bless you. You're amazing. But wow. I mean, when you're still a baby, you know? And so, especially your early 20s. But a lot, like you said earlier, a lot changes between then and 30, and then a lot changes again from 30 to 40, and so on and so on, and then we die. Yay! But I found in similar point in my life to what you're saying right now, that was a big eye-opening moment for me. I was like, whoa, nothing's guaranteed, but like, I just went and did this thing. I got paid this. What if I did more of this?
Yeah.
The opportunity is like, well, I always like considered a 10% raise a year. Like, wow, that's mind blowing, you know, all these things. But it's like, now you start realizing it's like, wow, there's as much opportunity in the world as you want to try to go grab. And it's not going to be given to you, of course, but it's there. And people
Yep.
are willing to pay people to provide a product or a service. You just got to have the idea and actually go do it. And then have a lot of moments like you described, which I've had many of, where you're laying awake at night going, okay, last month was feast, and now wait, oh crap, I forgot. Now I have to make another paycheck, and then I have no idea when that's coming. So I got to wake up tomorrow and figure out when. Like, I don't want to tell my wife I'm not getting a paycheck, right? So I got to figure that out. So there's those stressors for sure, and it sucks at times, but when you finally do get those jobs, or you know, and then also find fulfillment in what you're doing, wow, it's like an amazing sensation, right?
Yeah. I had such a naive, sheltered view of what was possible as far as like business opportunities. People like my husband has always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and he like has just dove into that head first. And even just like 2-3 years ago, he was like, you should start your own business. Like because we would both be able to work remotely. We could travel, like we would have all this flexibility. And I was just like, what would I do? Like, am I going to join like a multi-level marketing? I'm going to be selling, face cream or something.
Right.
Like, I'm like, that's just not my vibe at all.
Right.
What would I do? And then people had started to reach out to me to speak at things, and I had to say no because I was still on active duty and the Thunderbird schedule is just so busy. I definitely couldn't be paid to speak because there's a conflict of interest there. And then as I started to reach last fall, and I kind of had a date on the books for when I was leaving active duty, I realized that these companies and people that were reaching out, I could start to book that stuff past that date. And the first time they're like, what are your rates? I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea what my rates are.
What's a rate?
Like, yeah, right. Can you pay for me to fly there? Is that at least
right?
Much?
I'll pay you to let me do it.
Yeah, right. And then I reached out to some friends who I've been lucky enough to meet while on the team that are established in that space. And like one of them was just like, you're an idiot. Like, this is what you should charge. And when he told me, I was like, there's no way anyone is going to pay that for me to speak. Like, all I did was fly airplanes. Like, what? Right. But that was only 6 months ago for me, 7 months ago. And quite a journey I've been on since then. I like really took the time to dig into my career, but beyond just being like, I flew upside down really close to other people. Oh yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
That's not the speech people are paying for.
Right.
They're paying for authenticity and vulnerability, and to hear about my struggles with self-doubt and imposter syndrome and culture and the squadron and fitting into that, and the highs and the lows and almost G-locking in the jet. And that's what I talk about. And it's so much more impactful than being like, heck yeah, did you see Tom Cruise on Top Gun? Wasn't that cool?
Right. Yeah. No, I've been watching very closely what you've been doing, and that's one of the reasons I earlier when I said you must have been a straight A student is because every morning when I wake up, you have written something original that's thoughtful and inspiring and motivational on your Insta, or you plaster it all over your social.
Yeah.
And I know to some people that sounds small, but that's actually really hard to do. And that the work ethic and the thought that has to go into those things, and then just the depth of what you're writing about. I think it's kind of cool. Like at surface level, what you did, yeah, you're flying upside down, going really fast, all the things, spinning. That's cool. But to me, it's like at the highest level, it's about living a fearless life, even though you have fear.
Yep.
Right. And I've never seen your speech, but I want to. But if I had to guess, that's something like what I'm going to hear, and that's the type of thing I want to hear from people. Because when I look at you, I'm like, the things you're telling me about flying these airplanes like scares the living daylights out of me. Plus, knowing that you had social anxiety and all these things, I've struggled with anxiety myself. It gives me butterflies thinking about that. But the fact that you work through that and have still lived an adventurous life. And you said something I wanted to mention that I loved. Something along the lines of, and I poached this from you the other day, and I was talking to somebody and I threw it out there, but I did give you credit. So just wanted to give you, but it's something along the lines of, adventure isn't about like knowing exactly. You may know your destination, or at least what you think the destination is, but you may not know anything that's going to happen between A and Z. But it's going anyway, and just believing enough in yourself that you're going to figure it out. You're going to figure it out. There's nothing, you almost have to like put your MacGyver mask on. Like, I'm MacGyver. Nothing that's thrown at me here I can't figure out. Right? You talked about that, and I think that's, for most people, if they actually truly listen to what you're trying to say there, it could change their life, because that's why people don't start, right? They think they have to have everything figured out. And it's actually the opposite. You have to be totally okay with having nothing figured out.
Yeah. And that mindset doesn't just happen overnight. That's a lot of what I speak about, is kind of my evolution to get there, because I was a perfectionist, and I was very stuck in, all of a sudden I was in a difficult position and I didn't feel like I was doing as well as I wanted to be. And I realized like my whole identity was centered around being like the straight A student, and the one that just always does amazing at everything, top of the class. Like, it's like being your class valedictorian and then going to Harvard and suddenly realizing that you're like bottom third of the class at Harvard, because everyone around you is just elevated from you. All of a sudden just became a small fish in a big pond when you used to be a big fish in a small pond. And that was like, that threw me off for a while. And I was so scared to take on any like new challenges or opportunities, because I didn't want to fail and I didn't want people to judge me. And I was just paralyzed by that for quite a while. And then I think I just got to a point where I was like, I can't live like this. I'm not happy. And I'm in this amazing career that I worked so hard to get to, and I hate it at points. Like, I need to change that. And so I started doing exactly that. I was like, what are things that I've always wanted to do, but just never taken the time or the initiative to go do? So I like signed up for a marathon and started training for that. And I traveled to Nepal by myself and joined up with a group of strangers. We trekked Everest Base Camp. It was incredible. I would love to go back there tomorrow. It's amazing. And I got into technical mountaineering. I got into rock climbing and all these things that I've been like, oh, that's so cool. If I was wanted to do that, I was like, why not? Like, why not go do it? Why not take baby steps and start doing it? And just each of those little things kind of transferred over into my professional life as well. And I got more willing to put myself out there, and like all of those opportunities paid off so much. And that's what got me to a point where I would even consider applying to be a Thunderbird. because I wouldn't have I wouldn't have gone through that vulnerable application process. Maybe 2 years prior to that, I wouldn't have even tried. And I got it. And then, the Thunderbirds kind of put me in a spot where I all of a sudden had all this credibility and responsibility and ability to inspire people. And that, again, was another step in building this foundation where I was willing to make a leap into being an entrepreneur and being like, I've had so many of the guys I fly with that have been like, Mace, I don't know if I really want to go fly for the airlines, but what else would I do? Like, it's scary out there. I don't really want to stay on active duty, but what else would I do? And I'm like, there's so many things.
Oh my gosh.
Like, you looked at your resume, and I mean, some of these are other Thunderbird pilots. I'm like,
right.
There are so many other things you could do. There are so many people that would love for you to consult for them or speak for them, or like, there's just endless opportunities. And I think all those little tiny decisions that were scary, but that paid off, put me in a spot where I'm like, I don't need someone else to be my security net if another pandemic happens, which God forbid that's not going to happen. But you know what I mean? Like, something like that completely goes unexpected and completely goes wrong. I have the skill set and the determination to get through it and figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that path looks like, but I know that
you'll figure it out.
I have ownership. I will figure it out. We will be fine.
You'll survive.
Exactly.
Or it's most likely you'll thrive.
It's so freeing to get to that point.
It's unbelievable. And if you think back to the fears that you had, if you sorted through those in your brain, most of them end up being totally irrational.
Yep.
I mean, there's obvious ones that aren't, right? You can fail and not have any money. You could have something go bankrupt. You could, look, life's brutally messy and shit can happen no matter what you do with your job, especially. But most of the things that hold people back are at least partially irrational. Yep. I'd say a lot of times they're mostly irrational. And this is coming from somebody that has generalized anxiety. So, I mean, I have irrational thoughts all the time, but I've kind of learned how to deal with them. Yep. So what is, for those that are standing at the edge and they're scared, what is your advice for them?
It's a lot of the stuff we just said, that if you were looking at a friend that was about to do the same thing that you want to take on, and they were like, but I'm too scared, you would probably be like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what is it that is holding you back? What is the scenario that you've built in your head? And when you told them when you answered that question, it's likely the other person would be like, that's not going to happen. That makes no sense. And I think there's a lot of cliche sayings around it of, like, you're guaranteed to fail if you don't even try. Mm-hmm. But when you actually think about what that sentence means, why would you not at least try to take action and take the first steps and go, what is really the worst case scenario? Mm-hmm. And I just shared a story recently on LinkedIn and then on Instagram as well that people really liked about meeting my husband on Bumble. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw that one, but
no, I did.
I had matched with him on Bumble, and that's an app where the woman has to start the conversation. And once you're paired with someone, you have 24 hours or it times out and they disappear. Mm-hmm. And so you'll not be able to contact them again. I had matched with him, but I thought he was too good looking for me and I was intimidated by him. Mm-hmm. And so I had decided I wasn't going to message him. I was just going to let it time out. And he used this little feature where you can pay for, where you extend it for another 24 hours. And I saw him do that like right at the end. And I was like, well, I guess he's actually interested. Mm-hmm. So I'll send him a message. We got engaged 5 months after that. And we've been married for over 3 years at this point. Wow. And so I think about, that's such a in your face example, right? Mm-hmm. So what was the worst case scenario if I had sent him a message? He ghosts me and doesn't respond, mm-hmm. or he's like, oh, I accidentally swiped right on you, not interested, and I'm sad about it for a day and I go on with my life.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best case scenario? We're living it, right? So
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
like people, and I feel like very introspective, rational person, and I almost fell victim to that trap. Like I almost let my mindset sabotage a great thing. So that's a long answer to your question. But
Yeah. What I do is I make people either write it down and say it out loud or just simply say it out loud. Like I literally want you to tell me out loud so you can hear it too what your worst fear is. Not the kind of your worst fear, like the deepest, darkest, worst fear you have. Give me it all. Tell me. And usually what happens when you do that is it's not actually that scary. When you say it out loud, it's like, well, he may ghost me. Okay. Have you never been ghosted before? Everybody's been ghosted. So you survived. We all survived. It sucks. It hurts your feelings for like a second, but then you move on, right? Best case scenario, maybe this is my husband. Well, that's a pretty cool best case scenario. The best case scenario way far outweighs the worst case scenario, right? So what the hell? Send the message, right?
Yeah, I compare it to little kids that are scared of the dark. And then you flip the light on when you say it out loud. What the worst case scenario is, this big scary thing, you flip the light on and all of a sudden it takes away the power and you're like, oh, that was just my pile of dirty laundry in the corner.
Yeah.
Not a serial killer.
You'll like the pilot analogy that I have for this too. So like for those that are scared of flying, and I've done this too. I used to be scared of flying. I'm not at all anymore. In fact, I just fall asleep. But I used to get on airplanes when I had anxiety about it, and I would look to see if the pilot had gray hair or not. If the pilot didn't have gray hair, I'm like, oh great, I got a young guy. He's for sure going to crash us. But again, another bad example of like it has nothing to like it's a totally irrational fear basically and statistically. Like I was making up all these stupid things in my mind that were based not on fact, but just I was like spinning them together like I was a spider, creating a web in my mind of all these irrational things. And then after you fly for 15 or 20 years, you're like, you just pass out now on airplanes. It's like the most peaceful thing that happens in your life now. Like it's the only time I can get work done or read a book.
Yeah, I get a lot of work done on flights.
Yeah. But no, I think that's really good advice. I wish it was easier to implement. It's not. But you can take small steps, right? Like pick something that's not like quitting your job and starting a business today. That's scary.
Right.
But like pick something small. Like I'm scared of whatever, like something small that doesn't have dire consequences if you're wrong. And just start there. And you take baby steps and then you realize most of us are so resilient. And if you look at, if you're lucky enough to have family or friends that have grown old, you can look at them and be rest assured that they had way worse problems in their life that they lived through, and they're way older than you, so you can look at them and be like, well, this little thing I'm dealing with today, I mean, that person, she probably went through the Great Depression and World War II and, Vietnam, whatever. But I do that sometimes too. I'm like, dude, my dad has been through way more struggles than I have. And he's fine. I was with him last night. He was drinking wine and having a jolly old time, So like, there's nothing I can't get through. So why not? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've talked a lot about this recently, but people regret there's an author, Daniel Pink, and he has a couple books about regret. And he did all of these interviews and all these studies with all of these older people and asked them, what their regrets were in their life. And by far, regrets of inaction outweighed regrets of action by far. So people regretted what they didn't do. They regretted not making bolder choices, not taking more risks. They didn't regret messaging a guy on Bumble, or the equivalent 50 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And risk is such a funny word. So this morning, you'll appreciate this, Mace. My wife's a teacher. She asked me to go speak to her students about entrepreneurship, which I have no speech prepared. And it was last minute. It's their last day of school. I'm like, what do you want me to talk about? She's like, I don't know, just come in and we'll figure it out. So anyways, I mentioned risk to them because if you look up the dictionary definition of entrepreneur, it says something along the lines of like basically, an entrepreneur is someone who creates something, manages it, and takes a abnormal amount of risk. It's something like that. So I asked them about risk, and the definition of risk is so subjective based on what your personality is, right? And we look at it as a really scary word. But if you actually think about it, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, but risk. Most people look at risk in a professional perspective. Risk is financial, or is basically the one that is the big hang up, right? Financial. But the way I look at it is, if you're wired to be an entrepreneur, which a lot of people aren't, and that's totally okay. But if you are and you want to do it, you have risk working for someone else, high risk. I know tons of people that have been fired. Like, I don't know what this perceived safety or like job security is. I've never seen actual 100% job security. I mean, I know there's some cases, whether you work for the government or there's other things where you basically can't be fired. Yeah. But in most cases, in most jobs, especially in corporate America, there's no job security. Sorry, does not exist. So if you look at it that way, I actually look at my risk from an entrepreneur's perspective, my owning my own companies, as I would much rather, if I'm going to take $1 and bet it on someone, I'm going to take that $1 and bet it on myself over betting it on someone else's dream. Now, you may not think that way, and that's fine. But that's the way I think. And I actually think it would be a bigger risk for me to base my whole life working for someone else, because they're in control of you, like you said earlier, right? Your dream is to have full autonomy. If you and your husband want to go on a trip, by God, you're not going to schedule any speaking engagements, and you're going to go on a trip. Yep. That's my dream too. So I'm going to bet on myself. I even look at this from a stock market, like when investing money, which like I would much rather put $1 into one of my businesses than put $1 into the stock market, because when you put $1 in the stock market, you're betting on other people's things. But if I put $1 in my own things, I'm going to make damn sure that $1 grows. I'm going to die trying, right? So I don't know if that rings true for you too. Absolutely. I think it comes back to the ownership that you have as an entrepreneur. Like, I control, that's the thing I love the most. I control everything, and that makes me sound like a control freak, but it's on me. The successes, I get to celebrate that I made them happen, and the failures, I get to take responsibility that I made them happen. And that gives me the power to create my own destiny, which I will definitely bet on myself over rolling the dice on someone else. Yeah. Well, you are an incredibly inspiring person, and I consider you a friend now. And next time I'm in Vegas, I'd love to meet you and your husband. For sure. Any parting words of wisdom for those out there listening, or and also tell us how to find all the things that you're doing? Yeah, I really love this conversation, because we have really dove into a lot of the things that I'll use as parting lines at the end of an interview. I think we've gone beyond just the one-line quotes and really given some quality advice for people and perspective for people. So I think we've hit that. Instagram is where I've kind of built the biggest community, which is just at Mace_Curran. So my call sign and then my last name. There's a bunch of flying videos on there, cockpit footage, which people find really cool. As I've mentioned, I've been way more active on LinkedIn the last few months, and that's just my name with my call sign in it. So Michelle Mace in quotes, and then Curran. And then my website, which is really focused on the speaking. There's some clips on there of speeches I've given in the past, and that's how you get my business email and all of that. That's just macecurran.com. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and We're going to have to do this again because I got to about half my list of things that I wanted to talk about.
Right.
So
Episode 2.
absolutely. Best of luck in all the things. Congratulations on your successes and thanks for your service. And let's do this again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This has been a blast.
Well, thanks for tuning into the Altitude Show today. Make sure to get out and support those that support this show. GoHunt.com, peaksequipment.com. Also, you can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe there and leave a 5-star review. Nothing less than 5 stars. We'll see you next week with a new guest. Have a great day, everyone.